Oklahoma State's Mike Gundy's undoubtedly found new maneuverability in embracing some of the college football changes. Whether it be NIL, portal players, or recruiting, you have to stay at the top of these players' conversational pieces. And one of the best kept secrets in Stillwater is all of the GOATs that we need to bring on home.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things cowboy and cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we're brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment matter more, especially right now when new customers can get $200 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet is a winner. Head on over to FanDuel.com to get squared away today. Meanwhile, we get to talk about Mike Gundy, constantly going through different phases of adaptations from the beginning of the NIL era to the transfer portal era. And we've discussed how we had some guys like Tyler Patman and Lindsey Pipkins that were instrumental to Oklahoma State being in on the transfer portal before the era was really a thing. So Mike Gundy has had the adaptation abilities throughout the course of time, and most recently firing almost every single coach on the roster to bring in an entire new leaf. So this adaptation model can continue to get better if we're looking at more enhanced ways to get in on the NIL recruiting and portal conversations. And one of the biggest things that I find interesting in talking to recruits that are, coming up through the 7-on-7 circuit or the high school circuit is the amount of knowledge that is not permeating through Oklahoma State's GOATs. I mean, there's a decent number of people still yet that had no idea that Barry Sanders or Thurman Thomas came to Oklahoma State. I've talked to wide receivers that had no clue that Dez Bryant came to Oklahoma State. And then you have Justin Blackman about to join the Ring of Honor. We don't have an overabundance of Hall of Famers per se, but we do have an exorbitant number of dudes that carry a big name. Kevin Williams was just talked about when John Gruden did his box opening of Oklahoma State gear. He talked about Kevin Williams as well. He talked about Darren Williams. These are some of the Cowboy greats that we need to be more connected with. Leslie O'Neal being in the Ring of Honor needs to be more geared towards him standing on the sidelines. I think one of the best moments for me as a fan was watching the Bedlam game in 2021 where Dez Bryant was on the sidelines and going absolutely ballistic with the team and Mike Gundy. And whether Mike Gundy loved or hated or was somewhere in the middle of that scenario, while he's embracing the changes of the new staff and the changes in the NIL and the changes in the portal and what we're willing to do with the roster and what the expectations are going to be moving forward in recruiting, in order for all of that to continue to uptick, in my personal opinion, we're missing the boat here on having more of the legends on the sidelines. So if you could have more Dez Bryants, more Tatum Bells, more Brandon Whedons, more Kendall Hunters, I think that would go a long way. And even recently, we know Jalen Warren does come back fairly often because he's very close with Rob Glass. Would you know that Tylan Wallace comes back sometimes because his brother Trayson Wallace is on staff? Would you know that Mason Rudolph has come back to Stillwater a few times to be part of some of the game day festivities? Brandon Whedon being a marshal with Justin Blackman. All of that is a very big deal. But why would we not make this a regular occurrence, right? I think one of the layers of mystique to what Colorado is doing is the fact that they have a bunch of NFL legends on the sidelines on a daily basis. And most of them have nothing to do with Colorado. They just happen to be friends of Dion, or they happen to be Hall of Fame level names in the NFL. Bringing that cachet to the sidelines is going to be beneficial. And I think that's something that Mike Gundy could do more of. And since he is doing a lot of, changing of the guard and rolling over a new leaf per se in multiple avenues, this could be another way of doing so, right? You have Justice Hill likely to, back up Derrick Henry this season. Jalen Warren's going to be a starter in Pittsburgh. I think Ollie Gordon has a good opportunity to, at worst case scenario, be the number 2 at the Dolphins. We'll talk about that in a later episode. And then you have so many positions in the NFL that Oklahoma State's finding new ways to kind of be more aggressive in recruiting. So if you have the Malcolm Rodriguez and the Amen among Mamigas of the world, and now you have Nick Martin that recently was projected to be a starter already as a 49er, we need to have more of that connectivity, because one of the biggest things I do hear out on the 7-on-7 trail is, oh, I had no clue he went to Oklahoma State. I had no clue that guy was a Cowboy. I had no clue that guy ever grew up in Oklahoma, this, that, and the other. So even if you don't have an overabundance of some of these massive NFL names, when you do have them, they need to be more talked about. Chris Carson was somebody that was drafted in the 7th round, wasn't even a starter at Oklahoma State. We should be promoting that. We talk about Oklahoma State having a claim to RBU. There's not very many people out here that understand that Tyreek Hill played running back at Oklahoma State. So there's just so many avenues we could explore, even more so, in my opinion. If we're looking for more marketability for these young athletes, one of the best ways to do that is to have a face with the name on the sideline. Make it a section. Make it not necessarily a requirement, but if you can get Bobby Reed to come back and say amazing things about Oklahoma State, that would be a big deal. If you can get Chuba Hubbard to bury the hatchet with him and Mike Gundy, that would be massive for Oklahoma State. I mean, him being another starter in the NFL. This is a good time for Mike Gundy to continue this maturation process. He's embraced aspects of the portal. He's embraced aspects of recruiting that we haven't necessarily been very big fans of in the past. We're spending more money than ever. We've embraced this idea of having concerts essentially every single year now, multiple times a year, to help pay for some of the NIL stuff. These conversations are instrumental to the future success of Oklahoma State. But one of the things that we miss out on is having some of the biggest heavy hitters that have ever played at Oklahoma State on the sidelines. And guys, it doesn't just always have to be the Justin Blackmons and the Dez Bryants of the world, right? You could bring back Dan Bailey, arguably the best kicker at Oklahoma State. It was a longtime Dallas Cowboy. There's a lot of crossover between Dallas Cowboys and Oklahoma State Cowboys, which is why you could bring Dez Bryant back, of course, over and over again. Make him a regular. Heck, bring Jimmy Johnson back. Jimmy Johnson is an all-time Oklahoma State and Dallas Cowboy. He just gets put into this closet because he was a coach during some of our, getting put on probation years. But we need more Kevin Jenkins in Stillwater. We need more Blake Jarwins in Stillwater. Bring Malcolm Rodriguez back as often as possible. Get Russell Okung involved. I mean, not only was he one of the best offensive linemen to ever play in Stillwater, he had a massively successful NFL career. He's running a business right now. He's an expert when it comes to cryptocurrency. He's very good in helping guide young athletes on how their contract should look like. Why would you not implement some of that at Oklahoma State? Like, bring Russell Okung back to talk to the guys about finances and how they should invest and what their contracts should look like. Now that the NFL models seeped into Oklahoma State and the NIL is essentially a form of free agency, these are some assets that we could be utilizing to help put Oklahoma State on a bigger national footprint. Recruits don't know enough about our heavy hitters. Having a Barry Sanders statue, it's awesome. I mean, part of this was brought up by Mike Gundy being listed top 5 of the best coaches currently coaching in college football that played college football. And one of the biggest benefits of that actually is that he did it at his alma mater. A lot of those guys didn't do it at the school they actually played at. So I find it kind of interesting that Mike Gundy should be up on that list. Mike Gundy should be a higher on a lot of the list, but one of the most head scratchers as a fan has always been, well, why is there animosity with some of the former players? Why do we have multiple NFL starting running backs that don't have much to do with Oklahoma State or Mike Gundy? It doesn't matter what the reasons were or are. All that matters is we find new creative ways to embrace the NIL recruiting transfer era and rely on some of these heavy hitters. There's a lot of schools that have their former NFL dudes recruit for them on their behalf. We don't hear a lot of that. We definitely don't see a lot of it. You have somebody out here like Jeremy Smith that is helping land guys like Katie Batman Jones. We need more of that. We need more of those connections. Bobby Reed is doing his thing, coaching down in Texas, or has been for quite some time. Rashawn Woods is down in Texas doing his thing, coaching. We need more of these guys on the sidelines, whether it be their own section or whatever. If you're a former Cowboy legend, you should have an automatic spot standing on the sideline next to the players because it gives you a lot of visibility. How many times did the TV cameras cut to Dez Bryant on the sidelines during that 2021 Bedlam? And he's absolutely going crazy. That was a good look for Oklahoma State. And that was one of those moments that some of those up-and-coming wide receivers were like, oh, I had no idea Dez Bryant was a Cowboy, an Oklahoma State Cowboy. A lot of them remember his Dallas time throwing up the X. Most people don't realize that happened and started here in Stillwater. So Mike Gundy, with all of the maturation processes he's gone through that are absolutely phenomenal for Oklahoma State, this could be the next one. The Chris Lacey's and the Chuba Hubbards of the world, and maybe Justice Hills of the world that have some things to say about Mike Gundy. Maybe they're not true, but even if they are true, it's been enough time. It's been enough years. Mike Gundy needs to find a way to bridge the gap, bury the hatchet, and bring these dudes not only into Oklahoma State games, but make them part of the recruiting process. Let people know that if you come play linebacker at Oklahoma State, you could be like these other 3 linebackers that are still playing in the NFL today. You could be like these linebackers that are starting in the NFL, or these running backs that are all starting in the. We need to have more of that from a marketability on TV standpoint. And we saw glimpses of it with what the TV cameras were doing with Dez Bryant on the sideline, and we haven't seen it since. That needs to be a regular occurrence. Mike Gundy's growing a lot. He's going through a lot of adaptation. Why not make this an integral piece? If you come to an official visit or you come watch a game in Stillwater, it should almost be a guarantee that, oh, hey, by the way, when you're in Stillwater, you're going to run into the Dez Bryants of the world, the AJ Greens of the world, the Chuba Hubbards, the Chris Carsons, the Tyreek Hills. That should be a regular occurrence, and it should be part of the recruiting pitch that we give to dudes. Not like, oh, hey, come hang out with former NFL legends, but just let them know that the guys that you've looked up to or the guys that you maybe didn't even know enough about, these are the dudes that are going to be here to give you pointers, to give you advice, to be critical, and to help more Oklahoma State coverage get as big as physically possible. Speaking of making things as big as physically possible, we know the Thunder are doing the daggone thing in the playoffs, and this is going to be your opportunity now with the NBA playoffs in full swing and getting closer and closer to the biggest matchup of all. There's so many nights that deliver highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, can't-miss moments. It can be a game-winning three, a game-winning shot, a game-winning dunk, a breakout player. There's literally just not a better time for you to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy for you to stay in the game right before tip-off, even live during the game with player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. Fans now have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. How could a $200 bonus in bets add to the excitement of your first $5 hauler being a winner? What would it look like if you were to combine certain live prop bets mid-game based on how the action is going to unfold, or if you've got the line or a feeling of somebody about to go absolutely crazy? And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time for you to sign up. Head on over to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it is a winner, you'll get $200 back in bonus bets. Head on over to FanDuel.com today. Make every moment matter more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. All right, from FanDuel to the Big 12 duel of coaches, I found it kind of, I don't want to say funny, but I was looking at the coaches on the hot seat to see where Mike Gundy kind of stacked up on the list, and we're not very high up. And I don't think very many Big 12 coaches really should be. So looking at this list, coacheshotseat.com, number 1 is Luke Fickell. Now, why this is interesting is if you scroll down a little bit, number 6 is Scott Satterfield at Cincinnati. And you already know where I'm going with this. If Luke Fickell does not live up to the expectations at Wisconsin, Cincinnati has been a shell of themselves since Scott Satterfield took over. And that movie, even in of itself, didn't make a whole lot of sense because it felt like the writing was on the wall and he was going to be out. at Louisville before too long. So I found that pretty interesting. It would be wonderful for the Big 12 if they could land the services of, Luke Fickell back as in Cincinnati Bearcat, because Scott Satterfield's not doing so hot and probably not going to make it so long. Some other notable names: Lincoln Riley, number 3, hottest seat. Brett Venables, number 4, hottest seat. Then you have Brennan at Arizona. I find that one kind of interesting. I just don't see how you can get rid of a coach in year 2. I mean, regardless of what you think about the hire and regardless of how the season went with, Noah Fafita downgrading essentially quite substantially, Tedero McMillan arguably being the best receiver in the country and the best receiver in the Big 12. When you have some of that star power and you go backwards quite a bit, I understand it's bad for the brand. It's bad for business, but Arizona doesn't exactly have the most amount of money laying around either. I mean, we just heard last year that they had some difficulties when it came to some of the finances. So I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense for them to move on in year 2, unless they just have some donors that expect crazy amounts. Obviously, Rich Rod is not going to be on the hot seat returning to West Virginia. Scott Frost, year 1, not sure what the expectations are, but likely he's not going to be on the hot seat. Kalani Sitake, definitely not going to be on the hot seat, even with the Retzlaff stuff that's going on and how it's handled internally, externally. It doesn't matter. He typically has his team ready to rock and roll, and he's a BYU dude that's got to hold some water. Speaking of internal guys, I feel like Mike Gundy is safe because of all the changes that he was able to make in the offseason. Whether it be willingly or not, he still did fire every single coach, essentially. And he brought in some heavy-hitting names. We're paying some big boy money. Right? Todd Grantham getting $1.3, $1.4 million to start off. That's a lot for an Oklahoma State coordinator, but it makes sense when you figure he's going to be the head coach of the defense. Doug Meacham's already getting as much, if not more, than Casey Dunn was getting. And I think that is just an understanding by Mike Gundy that there's a different landscape, and you have to be able to win pretty convincingly when you have that level of talent. The NIL's kicked up. I think David Aranda, he's on some coaching hot seat list because he's 31 and 30 overall at Baylor. But even that record is slightly deceptive because Baylor has a ton of wins or losses, I guess we should say, that are by a touchdown or less. But so does Texas Tech. And at the end of the day, you do have to win those games. Additionally, Dave Aranda just won a Big 12 title. I know it was a few years ago now, and it feels like a long time ago. But I feel like regardless of what happens this season, after a 9-win year this previous year, I feel like he's probably going to be fine. Unless they absolutely tank like a 2-win season, 3-win season style of thing, and likely not going to happen. Another individual that probably should be safe, but there are some grumblings going around in Fort Worth that Sonny Dykes might be kind of on a hot seat. Crazy to think that your first year you beat Michigan, you play for a national championship, and now everyone talks about is how bad you got beat in the national championship. But you do have Josh Hoover coming back. They just had a 9-win season. I don't see Sonny Dykes going anywhere per se, but I guess there is a little bit of smoke in regards to the expectations of the coaches to be at TCU. So perhaps he could be on that list, but I don't necessarily see it. Another individual that might not need to be on a list is going to be Kyle Whittingham. He's not really on a list, to my knowledge, other than the fact that he did already name his head coaching waiting this previous season. Clearly, it did not go the way that he wanted, so he's back for yet another year. Is he on the hot seat? Probably not, because they already have a situation lined up to have a replacement. Chris Kleiman, not really a hot seat per se. He's still living up to expectations. He's still recruiting in the same Bill Snyder, esque realm of recruiting. So I think he's fine there. Lance Leipold shouldn't really be on a hot seat conversation. They do need to have an upgraded season, but this is KU. They do have higher expectations. They have put money into football and the facility, so there is going to need to be some wins stacked up here for Lance Leipold. Same with Willie Fritz. Yeah, the expectations are he's a program changer, much like Lance Leipold, and there's a need to get W's quickly But when you bring in a big name like Connor Weigman and you have some of the difficulties you do have in the recruiting transfer portal area, without spending an exorbitant amount of money in NIL, it's hard to expect him to continuously upgrade every single year. So I don't necessarily think Willie Fritz is or should be on a hot seat. And you know, whenever you look at the Big 12 as a whole, outside of Brennan, outside of Satterfield, I feel like everyone's pretty safe, which is something not every conference in the country can say. Whether it be previous seasons, recruiting, expectations, so on and so forth, there's not very many coaches in the Big 12 that are on the hot seat, unless some disastrous things happen along the way. Like Oklahoma State specifically, if you go from a 3-9 season to a 2-10 season, that might be one of the few things. But Mike Gundy's found ways to adapt and overcome very many situations. His stubbornness seems to be less of an issue than in years past, so he should be pretty safe. And by and large, the Big 12 Conference doesn't have too many coaches that are coaching for their job, in my opinion. Josh Holliday is the Cowboy baseball coach, likely also not coaching for his job, although there is going to be some pressure on a lackluster season. When you have Obrate, you have those facilities, you're going to be able to get things out of recruits that most Major League Baseball parks cannot provide. So the recruiting is not likely to change. We do know that Rob Walton is announced his retirement at the end of this postseason. So the pitching legend, when it comes to development and acquisition of talent, is going to hurt a little bit to lose. But whenever you look at the Big 12 as a whole, we didn't get a host site, which is surprising. But when you look at the rankings from Baseball America's, all 64 teams in the field, there is some respect here for the Big 12. So we'll talk about that and read some of the write-ups. Obviously, you got Vandy, LSU, Arkansas, Texas, North Carolina, the top 5. Auburn, Coastal Carolina, Florida State, Ole Miss, and Clemson around out 5 through 10. Number 11 is Georgia. Georgia is who Oklahoma State likely will play if we get past Duke. The write-up on Georgia is they made a super regional last year for the first time since 2008, lost a handful of quality pieces, but have not missed a beat. The Bulldogs will host a regional after winning 42 games and 18 SEC games. Naturally, their ability to put up home runs ranks them number 1 in the country at 133 bombs. They're an impressive 29-4 at home this season. And they're returned and poised for an Omaha for the first time since 2008. So they're not used to being in this situation. Number 15, the first Big 12 team is TCU. TCU probably could have been a host site, and if you go off of this Baseball America ranking, they should have had a host site. They were top 18 in the country when it came to strength of schedule. Their out of conference strength of schedule was 14th in the country. They have 20 quadrant 1 and 2 W's, including in the Big 12 tournament. So they definitely should have been. It is what it is. Going down next, you have Arizona at number 20. I think this makes sense. This is fair, and I feel like Arizona and TCU have the most manageable routes to reaching a super regional of all the Big 12 teams. 23, Dallas Baptist, pretty cool. If there was going to be a Brett Yormark, UConn basketball only, baseball only conversation, it would have to be Dallas Baptist, right? Followed by KU number 24. Yeah, amazing season. 43 overall wins is tied for second most in program history, and they were able to sweep West Virginia to kind of close down on the season. Going to Arkansas is not fun, but of course, they can make some things happen here. West Virginia, number 28. A story of kind of falling apart at the end of the year. And they did get a W in the Big 12 tournament, but it didn't end up being enough. The staff has a 4.21 ERA, which is top 21 in the country. They're not strangers. They can win on the road in regionals. They proved it last year. Number 31, Duke, who Oklahoma State is poised to play pretty quickly. Let's see. The 25 Duke Blue Devils reached their third straight appearance in regionals, the longest streak in program history. Their 17 ACC wins were second most during Pollard's tenure. Duke's regular season was headlined by standout victories over Clemson, though it secured a series over NC State. Duke has an impressive lineup of its own with 99 home runs, ranking 14th nationally. Next up, we have Cincinnati at number 34 in the top 64. Pretty decent ranking, actually. They've won 30-plus games in back-to-back seasons for the first time since 1999. They made a little noise in the Big 12 tournament. Kansas State kind of snuck in back-to-back regional appearances for the first time since 2010, 2011. Former Sooner coach Pete Hughes has the Wildcats looking at a potential run here. 17 conference W's is the most for Kansas State program. Right after K-State, our Oklahoma State Cowboys, an adversity filled season. Yeah, there were some ups, there were some downs, there were some injuries, but we are going to the regionals for the 12th straight season. We were on the bubble, one of the first last four teams to get in. We're definitely an underdog going into Athens, but with Harrison Bodendorf's 2.7 ERA and a 10-1 record, he could kind of catapult us into some nice territory. Then you have 42, Arizona State. Arizona State, kind of like West Virginia, most of the season looked like the cream of the crop in the Big 12, but as the season progresses, they kind of fell off a little bit. And that's it for the Big 12. So there is a lot of respect for the Big 12 in regards to kind of being in that 15, 30-ish range. So middle grounds in the field of 64. There's lots of Big 12 teams in there. Didn't get a host site, so there is a level of disrespect. This Cowboy Ball Club with Mario Pesca, Harrison Bodendorf, and Sean Youngerman, in their last 12 games, they're 8-0 with a 2.1 ERA, and out of 70 innings, they have like 63, 64 Ks. So we are peaking at the right time on the mound for the most part. Offensively, we have the capability to put runs up in bunches. We just need to find more consistent ways of doing it. Duke is a beatable team. Georgia is a beatable team. This is a winnable regional for the Cowboys. We could have got put in way worse situations. So this is actually not a bad spot for the Cowboys to be in. Just like it's not a bad spot for the Cowboys to be in if you're a fan of golf, right? Whether you win the national title or you play for a national title, the most exciting thing is the youth. 4 freshmen, a sophomore, a junior. This team is going to be a problem for the next 3 or 4 years. Everybody in the country now is taking notice of what Oklahoma State's golf program is going to look like over the next few years. So it's an exciting time, and we're just glad to have some postseason play opportunities and multiple sports because 2025 started kind of rough for us. Anywho, that's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, you know I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here in Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Do me a favor, hit the like button if you liked it. Hit the dislike button if you didn't. That's okay too. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe my podcast. And people out there, you're everything. I appreciate you. Do what you do. Hit some stars. Leave some reviews. All right, y'all. Later, my taters.